Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the legal foundation of your life in the United States, the very status you have sacrificed everything to secure and maintain, has been revoked overnight without a single warning, without an appeal process, and without any regard for the years you have contributed to this country. Now imagine that the green card you have been waiting for, the plastic card that represents your safety, your career, and your American dream, is suddenly no longer available to you because a policy memo was signed in a closed office in Washington, D.C., erasing your pathway to residency. This is not a hypothetical nightmare scenario, nor is it a scene from a dystopian movie. This is the harsh, unfolding reality happening right now to thousands of immigrants across America as a massive, seismic immigration update has just been announced, changing the rules of the game in a way we haven't seen in decades. If you are an immigrant, if you are currently on a visa, if you are waiting in the long queue for a green card, or if you know anyone who is navigating this complex system, you need to stop what you are doing and pay close attention to this video, because the information I am about to share is not just news. It is survival intelligence that could determine your entire future in the United States. Welcome to U.S. Immigration Insight, your most trusted, detailed, and reliable source for the latest immigration news, updates, and strategic guidance that actually matters in your daily life. I am incredibly grateful you are here today because we are covering one of the most significant and potentially devastating immigration policy changes we have witnessed in years, a shift that is affecting multiple visa categories, retroactively revoking legal status for certain groups, and completely shutting down green card pathways that were previously considered safe and routine. In this comprehensive deep dive, I am going to relentlessly break down exactly what is happening, identifying who is in the crosshairs, explaining why these changes are being implemented now, analyzing the legal implications for your specific case, and most importantly, providing you with a concrete, actionable survival guide to protect yourself and your immigration status. The announcement came just days ago from the Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and it has sent absolute shockwaves through immigrant communities across the country, creating a climate of fear and confusion that we are here to dispel with facts. The update involves several major components that are fundamentally changing the immigration landscape. First, certain legal statuses that were previously considered stable and renewable are now being revoked for specific categories of immigrants. Second, pathways to permanent residency that thousands of people were counting on have been abruptly closed due to new interpretations of the law. Third, new draconian restrictions are being placed on visa renewals and extensions. And fourth, enforcement priorities have been dramatically expanded to include individuals who were previously considered low priority. Let's start by dissecting the revocation of legal status, which is perhaps the most alarming aspect of this new directive. According to the new policy, individuals who entered the United States under certain humanitarian programs that were created through executive action rather than congressional legislation are having their protected status terminated. This primarily affects people who came through specific parole programs that were established over the past few years to address crises in specific countries. The administration's new legal argument is that these programs exceeded executive authority and were never properly authorized by Congress, and therefore they must be unwound to restore the rule of law. What does this mean in practical terms for you and your family? It means that if you entered the U.S. under one of these specific parole programs, your legal authorization to be in the United States, your parole document, may be expiring, and you may not be eligible for renewal as you expected. The programs being affected include certain country-specific parole initiatives that allowed people to enter and work legally while their cases were being processed or while they sought safety. Thousands of families are now facing the terrifying reality that they could lose their employment authorization documents, EADs, their driver's licenses, their ability to legally remain in the country, and potentially face removal proceedings. To understand the human cost, Let's look at a specific example. Maria, a 32-year-old woman who came to the United States 2 years ago under a humanitarian parole program from her home country, which was experiencing severe political instability. Maria did everything right. She applied, she was vetted, she was approved, and she received a 2-year parole status which authorized her to work. She found a job as a nursing assistant, rented an apartment, and enrolled her daughter in school, fully expecting to apply for an extension. Then this announcement came like a bolt of lightning. She received a letter stating that her parole program is being terminated. Her status will expire in 90 days, and there is no renewal option available. Maria is now facing the impossible choice of leaving the country voluntarily or remaining in the U.S. and becoming undocumented, which would make her subject to deportation and bar her from future legal status. This is the heartbreaking reality for thousands of people right now who trusted the government's invitation and are now being told that invitation has been revoked. Now let's pivot to the green card pathways that are being shut down, which is perhaps the most devastating part of the update for many immigrants who have been patiently waiting and planning their futures for years. The changes affect several categories, starting with those who entered on parole status. Previously, individuals on certain parole statuses were able to apply for adjustment of status to permanent residence if they met specific criteria, such as having a qualifying family relationship like a U.S. citizen spouse or an employment sponsorship. Under the new policy interpretation, people who entered through these now terminated parole programs are no longer considered to have been properly admitted for the purposes of adjustment, meaning they are no longer eligible to get their green card inside the United States, even if they have a valid sponsor. This is a technical legal change with massive consequences. It means that even if you have a U.S. citizen spouse who wants to sponsor you or an employer who has approved a labor certification for you, you cannot get your green card here. Instead, you would have to leave the United States and apply through consular processing at an embassy abroad. But this is a trap because leaving the U.S. after accruing unlawful presence can trigger a 3-year or 10-year bar to re-entry, effectively locking you out of the country. Second, the update affects certain employment-based green card categories, specifically introducing new restrictions on who can apply for permanent residence through employment sponsorship. The changes include stricter requirements for demonstrating that the position truly requires the foreign worker and that no qualified U.S. workers are available, a process known as labor certification or PERM. Additionally, certain industries that previously had more flexibility in sponsoring workers are now facing enhanced scrutiny and significantly higher denial rates. Tech companies, consulting firms, and staffing agencies in particular are being heavily scrutinized by the Department of Labor and USCIS, leading to a spike in audits and denials. If you are currently in the employment-based green card process, especially if you are from a country with long backlogs like India or China, these additional restrictions could add years to your already lengthy wait or derail your case entirely. Third, family-based immigration is also being impacted. While immediate relatives of U.S. citizens are generally still protected by statute, other family preference categories are seeing increased denials and requests for evidence, RFEs, that are increasingly difficult to satisfy. The overall message from these changes is clear. The administration is trying to significantly reduce both legal and illegal immigration across the board by tightening every available screw in the system. Why is this happening? The official justification from the administration is multifaceted. First, they argue that the previous humanitarian parole programs were an overreach of executive authority and created a shadow immigration system that bypassed Congress, claiming that allowing people to enter through parole and then adjust status was never the intended use of parole authority. Second, they argue that the employment-based system has been abused by some employers who use it to undercut American workers by hiring cheaper foreign labor, and that stronger protections are needed for the domestic workforce. Third, they point to national security concerns and the need to have better vetting and control over who enters and remains in the country. Critics of these changes, however, argue that these policies are cruel and counterproductive, pointing out that these changes break promises made to people who came legally and followed the rules. They argue that many of the people losing their status are contributing members of society who work in essential industries, pay taxes, and have U.S. citizen children, and that forcing these people to leave will tear families apart. Regardless of the debate, the reality is that these changes are happening and they are affecting real people right now. So, who exactly is affected? You are potentially affected if you entered under a humanitarian parole program established in the last several years. If you are currently on parole status and were planning to adjust status. If you are in the employment-based green card process in an industry facing scrutiny. If you are from a country with long backlogs, or if you are applying for a family-based green card requiring a waiver. Basically, if you are anywhere in the immigration system right now, you need to be paying very close attention. Now let's talk about what you can do, because this is the most important part. First and most important, if you are currently on a parole status or any temporary status, you need to consult with an experienced immigration attorney immediately. Not next week, not next month, but right now. An attorney can review your specific situation and tell you what options you have, as there may be alternative pathways available, depending on your circumstances. For example, if you have a U.S. citizen child who is 21 or older, they may be able to petition for you. If you have been in the U.S. for a certain number of years and can demonstrate extreme hardship to a qualifying relative, you might qualify for other forms of relief like cancellation of removal. If you are eligible for asylum based on persecution in your home country, that could be an option. The key point is that every case is different, and you need professional legal advice tailored to your facts. Second, you must become a meticulous record keeper and document everything. Keep records of all your immigration documents, all correspondence with USCIS, your work history, including pay stubs and W-2s, tax returns for every year you have been here, proof of residence like leases and utility bills, evidence of community ties, letters from employers, school records for your children, medical records, everything. If you end up in removal proceedings or applying for any kind of relief, this documentation will be your shield and your sword. Also, be very careful about what you post on social media, because immigration officials can and do look at social media profiles when making decisions about cases, so clean up your digital footprint. Third, if you are in the employment-based green card process, talk to your employer and your attorney about how these changes might affect your case. If your priority date is approaching and there's a risk of new restrictions delaying things, see if there are any steps you can take now to lock in your position, such as premium processing where available. If you're still in the early stages, understand that the timeline may be longer than you expected and plan accordingly. Don't make major life decisions like buying a house or starting a business based on the assumption that your green card will come through on a particular timeline. Fourth, know your rights. If you are contacted by immigration enforcement, you have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. You do not have to answer questions or sign anything without a lawyer present. If ICE comes to your home, you do not have to let them in, unless they have a judicial warrant signed by a judge. Know the difference between an ICE administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. Keep the phone number of an immigration attorney with you at all times, and make sure your family members know what to do if you are detained. Have a safety plan. Fifth, stay informed. Immigration policy is changing rapidly right now, and new announcements are coming out frequently. Follow reliable sources of information like U.S. Immigration Insight, where we break down complex immigration news into information you can actually use. Be careful about misinformation on social media. There are a lot of scams targeting scared immigrants right now, with people claiming they can fix your status or guarantee results for a fee. Be very skeptical of anyone making promises that sound too good to be true. Work only with licensed attorneys or accredited representatives recognized by the Department of Justice. Sixth, If you are eligible to apply for citizenship and you've been putting it off, now is the time to do it. U.S. citizens cannot have their status revoked, and citizenship provides the ultimate protection. If you've been a green card holder for 5 years, or 3 years if married to a U.S. citizen, and you meet all the other requirements, strongly consider applying now. Yes, there are fees and it takes time, but the security of citizenship is worth it, especially in the current climate. Seventh, consider all your options realistically. For some people, the harsh reality may be that staying in the United States is no longer viable. If that's your situation, it may be worth exploring voluntary departure, which allows you to leave on your own terms and potentially avoids bars to future re-entry. Let me share another example to illustrate how complex these situations can be. Carlos, who came to the United States 10 years ago on a student visa, completed his bachelor's degree and then his master's degree, found a job with a company that sponsored him for an H-1B work visa, and has been on H-1B status for 6 years. His employer filed for his green card 3 years ago, but his priority date is from a country with a long backlog, so he's been waiting, renewing his H-1B, paying taxes, and building a life. Under the new policies, his employer is in an industry that's facing enhanced scrutiny, and there's concern that his green card case could be denied or delayed even further, leaving him in a position where he's invested 10 years into building a life in America, but his future is completely uncertain. He and his wife are considering whether one of them should try to get a job in Canada or Europe as a backup plan. And this is the anxiety that hundreds of thousands of immigrants are living with right now. The legal challenges to these policy changes are already beginning, with several advocacy organizations filing lawsuits arguing that the revocation of parole programs violates due process rights. Some of these cases may eventually reach the Supreme Court. However, legal challenges take time, often years, and in the meantime, the policies are being enforced. It's also important to understand how these changes fit into the broader immigration enforcement landscape. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, has announced expanded enforcement priorities, meaning that more categories of people are now priorities for deportation. Previously, enforcement focused primarily on individuals with serious criminal convictions or recent illegal border crossings, but now, the priorities have been expanded to include anyone who is in the country unlawfully, regardless of how long they've been here. This means that even people who have been living peacefully in the U.S. for decades could now be targeted for removal. What does all this mean for the future of immigration in America? The reality is that we're in a period of significant change and upheaval, and it is likely that we'll see continued policy shifts, more legal battles, and ongoing political debates about immigration for the foreseeable future. What's clear is that the era of relative stability and predictability in immigration policy is over. Anyone who is in the immigration system or planning to enter it needs to be prepared for uncertainty. For those of you watching who are U.S. citizens but have family members or friends who are immigrants, you can help in several ways. Be informed about what's happening so you can provide accurate information. If you're eligible to sponsor a family member, consider doing it sooner rather than later. And be a supportive presence for the immigrants in your life who are going through tremendous stress right now. One more critical point I need to make is to be very careful about notario fraud and immigration scams. When people are desperate and scared, they become vulnerable to scammers. In many Latin American countries, a notario is a powerful legal position, but in the United States, a notary public is just someone authorized to witness signatures and has no special legal authority. Scammers often call themselves notarios and charge people thousands of dollars for services they're not qualified to provide. Only work with licensed attorneys or DOJ-accredited representatives. I also want to address the emotional and mental health impact of all this. Living with immigration uncertainty is incredibly stressful. The fear of deportation, of family separation, of losing everything you've worked for takes a real toll on mental health. If you're struggling, please reach out for support. Many communities have resources available, including counseling services that are either free or low cost. Taking care of your mental health is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Looking ahead, what should people in the immigration system be watching for? Keep an eye on any additional policy announcements from DHS and USCIS. Watch for court decisions in the pending lawsuits. Pay attention to what Congress is doing because ultimately comprehensive immigration reform can only come from legislation. Monitor processing times for your particular type of application and stay connected with your attorney. And keep watching U.S. Immigration Insight because we'll continue to cover all the major developments and break down what they mean for you. This has been a massive amount of information, and I know it's overwhelming, especially if you're personally affected by these changes. The bottom line is this: we're in a challenging time for immigration in America, with legal statuses being revoked and green card pathways being shut down. The uncertainty is real, the fear is justified, and the impact on individuals and families is profound. But knowledge is power, and understanding what's happening and what your options are is the first step in protecting yourself. Don't panic, but do take action. Get legal advice, document everything, know your rights, explore all your options, and stay informed. I really hope this video has given you the information you need to understand this massive immigration update and what it means for you. If this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up. That helps YouTube show this important information to more people who need to see it. Subscribe to U.S. Immigration Insight if you haven't already, because this is where you'll get accurate, timely, and practical information about U.S. immigration. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates because in this fast-changing environment, staying informed could make all the difference in your case. Share this video with anyone you know who might be affected by these changes. Do you have questions about how these changes affect your specific situation? Leave a comment below and let me know. I read every comment, and while I can't give personal legal advice, I can address general questions in future videos. Remember, at U.S. Immigration Insight, we're committed to keeping you informed about everything happening in U.S. immigration. These are difficult times, but you don't have to face them alone or without information. Stay strong, stay informed, and take care of yourself and your family. Until the next video, this is U.S. Immigration Insight, and we'll keep watching the immigration situation closely and bringing you the updates you need to know.